Welcome back to We Play Games. I'm Walker, and here we are discussing the Sikh Empire in our Basic Country Guide series in the Vicky 3 Academy. So the Sikh Empire, it's a really interesting country at the beginning of the game. You have a lot of power. Most of this power is, of course, going to come from the fact that you have 16 million population, which, for reference, Great Britain starts with 26 million. The United States starts with 15.7 million. So you start with an enormous population base, but of course you're not particularly industrialized, you have tons of peasants, and you're fairly backwards in terms of your technology. You don't even have urban planning, never mind academia. But you do have some things going for you. For instance, you have line infantry, and artillery, which means that you can have some very, very elite troops if you just want them. But that's not the most important thing for you. The most important thing for you is the structure of your country. You have a monarchy, and your monarch is an armed forces associated character, which means that it's going to be a little easier for you actually to get rid of serfdom here, because you don't need to worry as much about what the landowners do. You can defeat them fairly easily if you just have access to all of the guns here in your capital. If they're only rebelling and taking Pashtunistan, then it doesn't really matter. You're going to have plenty of advantages. And of course, the other thing you can do to get around it in the event that they want to rise up is you can just switch the unit types around here right before they rebel, and then your units should be able to plow through the rebellion pretty easily, and then you can get serfdom done and everything will be great. But of course that's going to require that you work with your rural folk, because your other IGs are really going to be non-existent at game start. You got to keep in mind how industrialized you are and what your laws look like. You do have slavery banned, which is good, but you do have serfdom, you have hereditary bureaucrats. Fortunately, you have professional army already, which is going to make crushing any sort of rebellion by your aristocrats a little bit easier. But you have a massive population, and so they can mobilize a lot of conscripts. You do start in mercantilism, which means it's actually going to be pretty easy for you to make use of corn laws once you have turned off serfdom. But you do start in traditionalism and land-based taxation and monarchy, autocracy, national supremacy, state religion, and closed borders. So you are pretty conservative in terms of your initial law setup. You don't have any institutions, but your leader being an armed force character and your heir being an armed force character means that you have a lot more flexibility in terms of how you develop your government moving forward, because you can have a reasonable amount of legitimacy here by just having the armed forces around. And of course you can dramatically increase their legitimacy by just increasing the amount of money that you're paying them. But your money situation doesn't look too good at the beginning of the game as the Sikh Empire, so you do need to account for that. My general recommendation is use one road maintenance all of the time. This is going to be critical for getting you a little bit of extra state construction efficiency. If you need to use more in order to develop territories out here, you can. But there's some good things that you can do here as the Sikh Empire with your authority. First of all, you can get a pretty reasonable amount of money per authority by clicking services here. It's about 800 or so, and it's mostly going to be targeting your wealthier pops anyway. And you can put liquor on, because liquor is going to be 0.76, but you are obviously going to need to increase your taxes to high, which is where, this contested government, especially if you have rural folk in government, can be pretty dangerous. So you are going to need to come up with a solution for your clout if you're going to be doing this. My recommendation as the solution here is bolster your armed forces. Armed forces can attract aristocrats, which is going to hurt the landowners here, suppress the landowners, and that'll even give you enough authority to promote social mobility down in Punjab. And if you want, what you can do, you can also increase your government wages for just a little bit of extra authority, which gets you up to 110, and then you can promote in Kashmir. And this is going to increase your literacy a lot. As your country grows and gets bigger and bigger, the impact of promoting social mobility is going to go down. But here at the beginning of the game, it's actually pretty reasonable to do it. One of the biggest problems for you as the Sikh Empire is that you do not have very easy access to iron. You have none in your starting territory, so you're going to need to either attack Afghanistan or into Baluchistan. And you probably also want to pick up Sindh while you're at it, because the pop types are going to be the same heritage, because the pop types are going to be the same South Asian heritage as you, Sindhi. And so it's valuable for you to annex their territories. Your buildings, you start with literally no tools. You start with a 5 stack of arms industry, which is really big. 2 construction sectors, and you can switch into citrus orchards if you want. But it ultimately is not going to help that much versus staying in full vineyards or maintaining single crop. So I wouldn't make too many adjustments in terms of your buildings over here, and just take advantage of the resources that you have. So you have glass. That means that you should be using market squares here, but you can't because you don't have urban planning. So you need to research urban planning as your first technology, and then you kind of need to research academia as your second technology, because you're going to need the ability to use this glass for something useful industrially. It's really going to next level your growth. Now, you do have an absolutely massive army here in Punjab, and one thing that you can do is to downsize it, but I think that realistically you're going to gain more from it using it at first, specifically to take some stuff here from Kalat, Sindh, maybe Afghanistan, put down a rebellion by your local landowner, and take some territory from the East India Company, because the East India Company does own some of Punjab, which is your capital province. There's almost 1 million pops living there, so it's pretty easy for you to see how reacquiring that should be useful for you, even if it comes with like absolutely no construction. But you can also take Delhi, which is amazingly useful because this is a 45 iron mine stack. And so what I think you should do here is the Sikh Empire is hope that you can declare war on Sindh, that they call in the East India Company, and then you take Punjab and Delhi. So we're going to go ahead and start a diploplay against Sindh. We are going to confirm conquer state. In terms of construction, in the meanwhile, it kind of doesn't really matter. We'll add some textiles, because textiles are generally going to be high value. When you have access to silk and dye, textiles are really good. But we're only building that because we really do need money, and there's really only so low we can press the cost of fabric and wood before other people start taking it out of our market. And so rather than focusing on trying to develop our economy that way, we're dealing with where we are right now, and where we are right now is we desperately need money. And so we're just focusing on the things that are going to generate the most of it. By starting this war in Sindh, you are going to want to make sure that your generals are well positioned. So right now we have a brave, experienced artillery commander. This guy sounds like he's really, really good. We're going to go ahead and promote him. And then look at your other generals. And in this case, all of our other generals kind of didn't really do anything. So we're just going to mobilize like this. We'll mobilize all our troops. We won't deploy the other two though. We'll hold them. And now we're hoping that the East India Company hops in on this war, because if they do, then we can send Ranjit Singh in against this territory. Is the East India Company not going to jump in on this fight? There they are. All right, good. So with the East India Company having joined the fight, we are going to go ahead and conquer Delhi, and we are going to conquer East India Punjab, and we're going to add war reps. We can't conquer any of the rest of the states because we don't have enough maneuvers, and I don't want to add war goals that are going to force us to go all the way to their capital, like liberating a subject, for instance. So we're going to pass with these unspent maneuvers, but we are going to take our commander, and as we get closer to the edge here, we're going to deploy Ranjit right here. We're not going to do it immediately because we don't want to start suffering attrition. In the meanwhile, we will improve relations with Great Britain because we don't need them messing with us. All right, and now our troops are going to do battle. Unfortunately, the Sikh Empire troops are going to have some difficulty here against the East India Company for now, at least until our best commander, Alexander Gardner, can march through and capitulate Sindh. And if we need to, we can increase taxes even higher, because we're not yet working on our serfdom. Once we get to that point, we are going to need to bring the rural folk in and keep the landowners out. We could even do that right now, actually. We'll wait until this war is looking a little more finished, and then we'll go ahead and start this. So our troops are making some serious advances here against the East India Company. We are burning through money, but fortunately, by getting war reps from EIC, we should be in pretty good shape economically. And by bringing them in by attacking Sindh, they won't call in their vassals and they won't call in the UK. And this is something that we're going to try to exploit in the future playing as the Sikh Empire, because anytime we fight the East India Company, we ideally are not fighting them because we're fighting their vassals. We're fighting them because we're fighting somebody that they have a defensive pact with, or we're attacking one of the little puppets. All right, Sind is about to collapse and capitulate. Conquered Sind. Persia has declared us their rival. Have they? Cute. Good for you, Persia. And because we are only claiming Delhi, Punjab, and war reparations, we actually have control of the board. We don't need to push any further. The only thing we're mostly getting here is the opportunity to beat up EIC troops. But we don't need to do that anymore. We can actually go ahead and start to be on the defense, which, given how the unit types are right now, given how defensively oriented our unit types are, I think that's going to be pretty useful for us. Oh, wow. Well, we broke through, and now I guess we're just gonna advance through EIC territory as quickly as we can. We don't really need to be fighting these fights. Yeah, I'm gonna say switch over to a defensive stance here, because we don't need to be throwing troops and money away. All right, we got urban planning. Excellent. With urban planning in hand, now our glass, which was kind of just doing nothing, can actually do something really useful for us, which is increase demand on glass. All right, well, some of these guys are just like marching around, going wherever they want to. Defend. Is anybody attacking over here? Nobody's attacking over here. All right, you're gonna go back to your home front. By sending them to standby, they won't be suffering attrition anymore, which is kind of all I really care about. There's just a massive garrison that's stationed down there. That's why it looks like it's threatening, but it's not really. And they are at 45% occupied. We'll take academia, confirm. So now we have a new government, but it's going to be one that's going to allow us to do serfdom abolished, which is what we're going to do. All right, we're about to capitulate them, and that is going to fix up our economy, at least short term, because we won't have all these troops mobilized, plus we'll be getting paid East India war reparations. So yeah, we're getting 8.5k in Diplo pacts from them. And now we're going to hold on to our military, at least temporarily, and we are, of course, going to incorporate Delhi. It's only going to take 5 years, but it's going to give us a massive increase in the value of this province. And now, because we took Delhi, we actually have enough bureaucracy that we can incorporate Sind as well. Don't forget, Delhi comes with 8 government administration buildings. It's a big deal. All right, so that's the way that I would recommend setting yourself up initially with the Sikh Empire. If you want, you could push push your glassworks to the top ahead of textile mills. If you're going into urban planning, that's actually probably a good idea, because you do get a lot out of having more glassworks flowing around if you have access to urban planning. But by taking Delhi, we do gain access to the iron mines there, which means that we can switch our construction sectors over to being iron frame buildings whenever we want to. Now, when we are floating at 31 legitimacy and running high taxes, and we're working on serfdom abolished, it might not necessarily be a high priority yet, but you can get to the point where you're doing this pretty quickly. Oh, you do have an arms industry in Delhi. Probably need to remove some of these or export them. Yeah, we're just gonna fire some arms industries. That was a really bad idea. Yeah, that's the basic setup for the opening for Sikh Empire. I think after you've done this first war with the EIC, you do need to be very careful, because the EIC is going to be a dangerous foe throughout the remainder of the game, and they are not done being a thorn in your side. And in this game, we have the Persians as a rival. They've declared us a rival, and so if we're going to expand into any of these territories like Kalat or Makran, then we need to be careful about how we do it. I think you need to be acutely aware of the diplomatic situation out here when you're playing as the Sikh Empire after you've taken Delhi. But I think that generally speaking, because you have a massive army, you should probably use it, and you should almost certainly try to get serfdom abolished done as quickly as you can, because if you can get serfdom abolished done, then you can start on your corn laws, which is really just amazing. Yeah, so for instance, we could do 20% enactment success chance here as our first action. That's pretty big, right? You're going to be able to get serfdom abolished done, and then once you get serfdom abolished done, then you can go in here, you can go over to your grain, click encourage exports, and then you bring the landowners back into government somehow, and you're going to use corn laws. corn laws requires the landowners be powerful and part of the government. So if you have to put them down in a civil war, you can. Just make sure that their power comes back at some point. And then you bring them in, make sure that you have no serfdom. You can click corn laws, and that will add an event that'll give you a new leader for your landowner that's going to have the market liberal effect. And that market liberal effect is going to make it so that the person in charge of the landowners is in favor of switching from traditionalism into laissez-faire, which means you'll get way more money in your construction investment pool, and in favor of switching from mercantilism into either free trade or protectionism. I think actually there's a very good argument to be made for free trade if you can get enough ports. But whether or not you can get enough ports kind of depends on where you go with the Sikh Empire. But be aware that because you are the South Asian heritage and you're in the Eastern culture or Eastern religion group, that you can tolerate an enormous number of pops by just being on racial segregation and freedom of conscience. And so don't be afraid to use that for your advantage, conquer a bunch of India. You still will have plenty of authority, which will be helpful when it comes to manipulating your interest groups or just bringing in more money through consumption taxes until you get your economy up to the point where you are no longer dependent upon East India Company war reparations. Expand in this area and see where you can march out into the world. You might even be able to form India. All right, that's Walker.